So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce Jamie, who's going to kind of open up the conversation today. And really the reason why we decided to have Jamie open the conversation up is really based on his experience. He's been at this for over 20 years, helping organizations with technology. And he has deep experience on the data center side with a background working at Cisco, NetApp, and HP. And now he's been with InterVision for over 8 years, and he's seen our cloud journey as we've transitioned from a strategic service provider. And, really that's the experience that I thought made him particularly equipped to have this conversation today about our journey and helping you at each phase of your cloud adoption lifecycle. So he's always actively listening to what our clients have to say and their needs. And with that active listening, I think he's seeing the cloud journey through the same lens as many of you are today. So with all that said, I'm going to turn things over to Jamie, and I'm really excited to have him tell our story to you. Jamie, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you.
All right, well, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the endorsement as well. And good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Really excited to see the number of folks that are attending. I think it's a record number for us. And really what's cool is the fact that 50% of you joined us last year and then are joining us now. So I think we did something right, and I think you will get something out of today. You know, as we put together what we were going to talk about for the agenda, what we did was we said, you know, let's go out and really answer the question of what are the reasons and the roadblocks to cloud adoption. So we surveyed about 100 of our clients and prospects, so many of you, that are in the mid to enterprise size companies throughout the U.S. And we asked a series of questions that we really thought would set the framework for what are the current challenges that folks are facing? What are the things that we feel like we should address for you? And it's also, it ties in very nicely with a lot of conversations we're having with our existing clients. And I think this first question is really, you know, kind of sets the tone of what is your organization expecting in terms of being cloud first? And 92% say that they agree or strongly agree that the organization expects them to be operating with cloud first. What's interesting here is that's really high to what we've seen in the past. It's probably 10 to 15 points higher than when we looked at this data in November. So we can see that there's a real big ramp to say cloud first has to be a reality. So, you know, if you're in this boat and you're saying that's what your organization is asking you to do, I think you're going to like what we put together for you because it's talking about that journey and maybe where some of the challenges are. So let's look now at what everybody came back in that survey to talk to us about with the drivers. What were the drivers, right? So really here, none of these are pretty diverse. I didn't see any real front runner here. I think in terms of scalable resources at 61%, that's the elasticity that we hear about all the time. The ability to scale up, scale down, the ability to throw extra compute when needed, or said in a different context, to roll out a contact center that maybe you didn't have before over a weekend. We have several clients that are on this call that did that. Unlike in the past, to do something like that would take you 6 months to 12 months, right? So the ability there is, that elasticity is something that drives, but I would ask you this question. If you're looking at this and you didn't respond or didn't have any answers into this, what are your 3 drivers? And then how do they align with your executives? Because I often see that that's the biggest disconnect. You believe that these are the drivers for cloud adoption and your executive team thinks something different, right? So let's, next slide. Migration, yeah. One of the things that we also see a lot of times, and I'm sure this is no different for many of you on this call, right? How have you been stalled or slower than expected in your migration to the cloud? Overwhelmingly, 62% of the people said yes. It doesn't surprise me. If anything, I'm surprised it's actually not higher. So let's look at why we think that is. Next slide. So, the overwhelming response, and again, no surprise here, is that we see this all the time, is the skill gap. I think I think the challenge is we have very smart engineers in our company. They have worked very hard at learning, the public cloud and AWS in particular. They've gotten their certification, but the challenge is the practical knowledge. Have they done a migration before? Have they done 5, 10, hundreds of migrations? Do they know how to set it up for scale, right? That's the difference in the skills gap, right? We can get to the very first part. I can migrate, a website to AWS. I can push my data over in backup as a service, but do I really have the capabilities and the skill set to look at the overall infrastructure, make sure it sets up for scale, make sure it's set up for security, and continues to make sure my cost optimization? That's the challenge. The other piece that I see here that stands out is existing infrastructure. And that usually happens in 2 ways. And I'm sure if I can see you all live, I'm going to get some head shaking. Usually a lot of times you have an infrastructure team and then you have the cloud team. And they kind of see each other as a little bit of, adversaries for some reason. And so what happens is one doesn't think the other understands each other. And that becomes a giant challenge because some of your infrastructure may not be cloud native. Some of it may be, right? Some of it you have a fair amount of technical debt. You can't just write off everything you have. Other parts of your business you can. Again, are your security policies set up so that they scale into the cloud environment so that you don't have to rewrite all your policies? There's a litany of issues here that existing infrastructure plays a very big role in that challenge. So, one of the things I always ask is, what's the reality of saying we're wanting to be cloud first and actually looking to be and really showing that you're cloud first? So if you go to the next slide. So as you look at this, right, 88% of the folks say we're cloud first, but 86% of the spend still goes to on-premise. That goes back to the alignment with the exec team, right? Are we putting our money where our mouth is? Are we really doing what we think it is? Or are there things that are inhibiting us from doing it? I think if you look at those bottom 8 bullets, you're going to see that there's some of the stuff I just talked about on the past slide, that plays a very big part of this. You have to understand those areas to be able to make that transition. Otherwise, if you don't understand that, you're going to get stuck. And we see this a lot. I can migrate certain native apps much easier, but then when I get to my legacy, there's other inhibiting factors that if I don't take them into consideration, I'm going to get stalled. So how do we answer that? If you go to the next slide. I think for us, we at InterVision think we have a unique opportunity here to be able to solve that challenge. And if you go to the slide, next slide, Chris. And I think it comes down into these kind of areas here. So if you're looking at the upper left of the slide, the deep data center expertise, right? So we've been 25, 27 years located here in Silicon Valley, built out arguably some of the most technologically advanced data centers of technology companies out there. In conjunction, for close to 15 years, we've been running managed services. So we've been running our own operation centers. So we also, too, have our own capabilities of supporting many of you and many of our clients in the same context that others have to understand. You then couple that with our cloud expertise. Let me put this in context for folks because I still think this gets a little challenging. AWS has 50 some odd partners in the Americas that are at the premier status. They have 20,000 partners, but they have 50 of them that they say, you are the upper echelon. That's InterVision. Then on top of that, you look at some of the competencies there around migration, DevOps, storage, and user compute. Those there within that premier ranks, then there's very few that have some of those competencies. So and AWS by design makes it very stringent to become part of that so that you don't have to ask the questions about how many times have you done this? Do you have the capabilities? Is this the right partner? You know that designation there, you know that competency is there, then you all of a sudden look at that and say, they're very strong in the cloud. You couple that with the data center expertise and the operational experience, and you're going to call what we call our superpower. We then tie in many of those partners you see there below to work with us, the NetApp and Cisco, things that you have in your environment, back to the hybrid. So that is the component of it that we believe is our superpower that allows us to bridge that gap between the cloud team and the infrastructure team. So we plan out something for you that's scalable. So you can say, that's great, but then if I go to a cloud process, what does that look like? So we go to the next slide. Our approach to the cloud is looking at it from a lifecycle assurance. We absolutely believe that it's not just about, I've got one application, I'm in AWS. I would assume everybody on this call has something they're leveraging with AWS. That's kind of a given. The challenge is, how is that migration going? Have you migrated only 5 apps or 10 apps, but you have 600 more sitting there to go? So we look at this process, and we have a very methodical approach. And I think you'll hear this from some of the speakers later on, that the ability for us is to look at it and build something out that is going to scale for you, minimize as much of the risk as possible, keep the operational process going, that you don't have to run into security concerns. And then probably the most important, as you start to leverage more of the cloud, you also have the big part of this is cost optimization. You're going to hear about that in the later part of the sessions. So those combinations really show that we understand that lifecycle process. It's a methodical approach. It's a proven, tried one. That's how we got the migration competency. But what's interesting is when I speak to the analysts and we talk to them, one of the things that they really point out that's a differentiator is our ability, as we help you through that journey and that process, is to allow you to run your operations in really 3 different fashions. We can allow you to manage it. We can do co-managed. So we have a lot of clients that are on this call today that, on a weekly basis, if they need to contact us in their ongoing operation, maybe they broke something, maybe they didn't understand something, they can call us. And then the third part of it is the fully managed. And that's us working with AWS, which you're going to hear a little bit more about later, in their AMS environment. And we use our operation centers, so 365 days, 24/7, to be that conduit to leveraging the best practices in the environments that AWS runs their own business on. So you get all the benefits of their automation, you get all the benefits of their learned behavior, and we will manage that for you. I don't think there's but a handful of partners out there that are premier, that have the migration capabilities and have the full AMS. And AMS is actually getting more flexible, so you're going to hear a little bit more about that. If you go to the next slide. So a lot about why I think we're what we do different and what differentiates us, but it's nothing better than ever hearing from your clients. So if you tuned in last year, you remember Sam Nasser from Taskus talking about why he chose InterVision and why he was working with us. He had originally been working with us just on the infrastructure side. But what I found interesting about this story was in their competitive differentiator was when the pandemic hit, being a true cloud-first company, they knew they were going to solve the challenge of sending 16,000 workers out of the call centers home. They knew they were going to solve it with the cloud. They didn't know how, but they knew they were going to solve it. I ask you, how many of you said, we're going to solve it with the cloud, or did you think about it doing a different way? That's truly cloud-first. The result of that allowed Sam's company to really, they were already ranked pretty high in the marketplace compared to the competition on Glasshouse. They just surpassed that even more because the other competition had to leave their folks in the call centers during the pandemic. So when you're a cloud-first company, you can more importantly be a people-first company. The depth of expertise, as I talked about before, was highlighted here with DirecTV. And then Land of Lincoln. Ben may be on today. I saw he was on the registration. Hey, Ben. What I like about Land of Lincoln is they truly see that value I showed you 3 slides ago. So not only are they looking at us for their managed services to augment their teams, but they've also looked at us now to say, hey, help us do a DR to AWS. You could do that to our data centers if you wanted maybe a faster RPO and RTO, but maybe cost is a bigger reason. You can say I can go slower to that, but I want a more cost-effective solution, go to AWS. What I like is Ben's also looking at us for rolling out some switching for their environment and some wireless. So we're that partner that can really bring in the credibility in all different levels of their business and help them, and they don't have to work with the multitude of partners. And if any of you are, dealing with your procurement systems or your financial teams, the less vendors that they can use, the less folks that partners, the better. And so the last slide here is, again, I'll say is, why InterVision and CMLA. So I talked about it. There's 50 partners in the Americas that are at that premier status. We have a comprehensive approach to the CMLA. We look at this as a migration lifecycle assurance. It's not a one and done. There's an ongoing process to this. We can help you with the operational side if you want to manage it, if you want us to be involved. But only when you're looking for our help, you need some flexibility around that, or you want us to fully manage certain applications. We have that capability. Obviously, we've worked with a lot of the cloud providers. We've been in the data center here in Silicon Valley, as I previously mentioned, working in some of the most complex environments. And we have a lot of understanding with partners. We spend a lot of time working with them because we have to. We have to know what's up and coming. We have to know what's new in the environment. But I'll tell you one thing that as I close here, that stood out to me 2 years ago at our sales kickoff. We had 3 different clients that were up on stage talking to the sales organization, and 3 of them were all from different fields, different verticals. And so the question came up from one of the sales teams was, you know, why InterVision? Why do you look at us? And the comment came up was, when we work with your team, we get all your A players. Your A players came from PwC, Accenture, KPMG. When I work with them, that's who ends up working on my project and ends up delivering it. I don't get put to a second-rated team. You have the depth of experience, so I don't have to wait for weeks and weeks to get to the person that knows something about some other part of the, you know, the infrastructure of the business. It's all readily available. And then here was the 4th piece. I don't have to commit like I do with the big consulting companies, $10 million. We'll take it, but I don't have to commit to 10 to 20 million to get that same experience. So I thought that was pretty cool. That was right from, I know that 2 of those clients are on this call. So, you know, you'll know what I'm talking about. But hopefully that gives you a quick view. I had 15 minutes to run through for those that don't know InterVision, or maybe a reminder of who InterVision is, what the challenges are, and why we think we solve them best. So I thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Take care.
Jamie, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. We did have one question come in there at the end, and they asked, does InterVision still provide data center and co-location services, or is cloud the primary focus? I think I could answer it, but I think you're even more equipped.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we believe it's a hybrid world, and you know, for us, it's really where the 3 rights that Chris showed you in the beginning talks about. Where's the right premise, right? Where do you want to put your data? Do you want to put it in your data center, our data center? Do you want to put it in the public cloud? What technology do you want to use? We want to go where you're going. We want to go where the market's going. We will bring a consultative approach to make sure we understand what you're trying to achieve. And I think it's our duty to bring ideas that we're seeing in the market that may fix you, you know, may help your cause. But we have plenty of clients that, you know, are still in the data center and plan to be for a long time. We have clients that are planning on being a hybrid, which I think everybody ultimately is going to be. And then we have clients that are born in the cloud.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jamie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So moving on here, going to just take a moment here to have our first poll question. And it really is just aligned to what we just talked about. You know, for the folks of you that are joining us today, how far are you today in your cloud adoption journey? The poll's opened up now. We'll leave that open for the next 5 minutes. And again, a big thank you to our sponsors for today, AWS, NetApp, and Cisco.